I thought it was just a place to crash, until I woke up next to her. My best friend, Ryan, invited me to his place for a big summer party. You know the kind, too much beer, too much noise, people spilling out into the backyard, and no way I was driving home after midnight. His mom, Claire, caught me stumbling toward the couch and laughed, saying there was no way I was sleeping on that lumpy thing. She offered me the guest room, said it was no trouble at all. Simple, right? Just crash for the night, head out in the morning, no big deal. Except it wasn't that simple. One stupid mix-up, one night in the wrong room, and suddenly I'm tangled in something I can't explain. Something that's got me questioning my loyalty, my judgment, my entire sense of who I am. I'm still trying to figure out how it went so wrong, and why I can't shake the guilt that's been gnawing at me ever since. Let me take you back to that night, because if you think you've made some bad decisions, wait till you hear this one. Ryan and I go way back, all the way to high school when we were just a couple of awkward kids trying to figure out who we were. He was the guy who dragged me out of my shell, convincing me to skip class for a burger run or talk me into joining the soccer team even though I had 2 left feet. He's loud, fearless, the kind of friend who makes you feel like you can take on the world, even when you're just sitting in his basement playing video games. His family's always been like my second home. His mom, Claire, was the cool mom, always baking cookies for our game nights, never freaking out when we got too rowdy or tracked mud through the house. She was in her early 40s, fit, with this warm laugh that made you feel like you were part of the family. She'd tease us about our bad haircuts or our obsession with energy drinks, but it was always kind, never mean. I never thought of her as anything other than Ryan's mom. She was just Claire. The woman who'd patch up our scraped knees and make sure we didn't starve during our all-night Call of Duty marathons. That was it. Until that night. It was a Saturday in July, one of those summer parties where everyone shows up and then some. Ryan's place was packed, friends from college, some neighbors, a couple of his cousins who'd driven in from out of town. The backyard was a mess of solo cups and lawn chairs, music blasting from a speaker someone had rigged up on the porch. I was having a great time, catching up with old friends, laughing at Ryan's terrible dance moves as he tried to show off for some girl he'd just met. Maybe I was having too good a time, because by midnight, I'd had one too many beers to even think about driving back to my apartment across town. Ryan was in no better shape, slurring his words and challenging everyone to arm wrestle like he was some kind of pro wrestler. Claire was there too, floating around, playing the perfect host. She'd refill the chip bowl, make sure nobody broke the patio furniture, and laugh at our dumb jokes. She caught me stumbling toward the couch in the living room, probably looking like I was about to pass out, and shook her head. "No way you're sleeping on that thing," she said, her voice light but firm. "Guest room's open. I'll grab you some blankets." I thanked her, barely coherent, just grateful for a real bed instead of a couch that smelled like beer and regret. Their house was huge, one of those old colonials with creaky floors and more rooms than anyone needed. Ryan had moved back in after college to save money while he figured out his next step, and Claire had turned the place into a revolving door for friends, family, anyone who needed a place to crash. I followed her upstairs, half asleep, my head swimming from the beer and the late hour. The hallway was a maze of doors, and I was too out of it to pay attention to where I was going. She pointed me to a room at the end of the hall, said the bed was made, and told me to holler if I needed anything. I mumbled something that I hoped sounded like, "thanks," and pushed open the door, kicking off my shoes before crashing face first onto the mattress, still in my jeans. The room was dark, the bed was soft, and I was out before my head hit the pillow. Lights out, done. Or so I thought. I woke up in the middle of the night, disoriented, my mouth dry and my head foggy from the beer. The room was pitch black, but something felt off. The bed was too soft, not the stiff, creaky mattress I'd expected from a guest room. There was this faint smell of lavender, like candles or fancy soap, not the musty, unused vibe of a spare bedroom. I blinked, trying to get my bearings, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone. Someone was in the bed with me, breathing softly, just inches away. My heart started pounding, like I'd just sprinted a mile, my pulse so loud I could hear it in my ears. I turned my head, slow, like I was afraid of what I'd see, and in the dim moonlight coming through the window, I saw her. Claire. Ryan's mom. She was asleep, her hair spread out on the pillow, one arm tucked under the blanket, her face calm and soft in a way I'd never seen it before. My stomach dropped to the floor, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. What the hell was going on? Had I stumbled into the wrong room? Why was she here? My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it, but it was like my brain had short-circuited. I tried to piece it together. I remembered Claire pointing me to the guest room, but I was half drunk, barely paying attention. The house was big, and all the doors looked the same in the dark. Maybe I'd misheard her, or maybe she'd meant a different room. But why was she in here now? Was this her room? My first instinct was to bolt, just grab my shoes and get out before this got any weirder. I started to move, easing myself toward the edge of the bed, but the mattress creaked, and Claire stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and she saw me. For a second, we just stared at each other, both of us too shocked to move. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice low, like she was afraid of waking someone. I thought this was the guest room," I stammered, my face burning, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. She sat up, pulling the blanket around her, and I could see the confusion in her eyes turn to something else, embarrassment, maybe, or something heavier, something I couldn't name. "This is my room," she said, her voice barely audible. "The guest room's across the hall." I wanted to die right there. I started apologizing, tripping over my words, saying I'd leave. I didn't mean to, it was a mistake. I was already half off the bed, fumbling for my shoes in the dark, when she put a hand on my arm, stopping me. "It's okay," she said, her voice softer now, almost too soft. "It's late. You didn't mean to. Just stay. It's fine. I should have left. I know that now, looking back, with all the clarity of hindsight. But in that moment, my brain wasn't working right. I was tired, still a little drunk, and her voice was so calm, so reassuring, that it felt like the most natural thing in the world to just nod and stay put. We didn't say anything else. She lay back down, facing away from me, and I stared at the ceiling, my heart still racing, trying to figure out what the hell I was doing. The bed felt too small, the room too quiet, and every little sound, her breathing, the creak of the house, felt like it was screaming at me to get up and go. But I didn't. I stayed. The next few hours were a blur. I didn't sleep, not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see Ryan's face, hear his laugh, and this wave of guilt would hit me so hard I could barely breathe. What was I doing in his mom's bed? Nothing had happened, not really, but just being there felt like a betrayal. I kept replaying the moment Claire touched my arm, the way her voice sounded when she told me to stay. It wasn't flirty, not like some cheesy movie scene, but there was this weight to it. Like she didn't want to be alone either. And that scared me more than anything, because it made me wonder if I was reading this all wrong, or if there was something more going on, something neither of us was ready to admit. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just a stupid mistake, but my body wouldn't calm down. My heart kept pounding, my hands were clammy, and I couldn't stop thinking about how close she was, how easy it would have been to say something, to do something, to make this so much worse. Morning came too fast, the first light creeping through the curtains like a spotlight on my bad decisions. I slipped out before Claire woke up, grabbing my shoes and tiptoeing down the hall to the actual guest room. I didn't want Ryan to see me coming out of his mom's room. What would he even think? I threw myself onto the guest bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was all a dream, that I hadn't just spent the night in the wrong bed, with the wrong person. But the lavender scent was still on my shirt, and my heart was still racing. I spent the rest of the morning avoiding Claire, sticking close to Ryan as he nursed his hangover with coffee and bad jokes about the party. He was his usual self, oblivious, laughing about how he'd almost broken his arm trying to arm wrestle his cousin. But I could feel Claire's eyes on me when we passed in the kitchen, and it wasn't just awkward. There was this unspoken thing between us, this secret we were both carrying. Nothing had happened, not technically, but it felt like something had. Like we'd crossed a line just by being in that room together, by not saying anything, by letting that moment stretch out in the dark. The days after that were hell. I couldn't look at Ryan without feeling like the worst friend in the world. He was the same as always, cracking jokes, planning our next hangout, texting me dumb memes at 2 a.m. But every time he mentioned his mom, I'd flinch, like he was about to figure it out. "Mom says you're welcome to crash anytime," he'd say, grinning over a beer, and I'd force a laugh, my stomach twisting into knots. I started avoiding his place, making excuses about work or being too tired. I'd tell him I had a deadline, or my car was acting up, anything to keep from going back to that house. But the truth was, I couldn't face Claire. Not because I was mad at her, or even embarrassed anymore, but because I didn't trust myself. That night kept replaying in my head, the way the room felt too small, the way her hand felt on my arm, the way I didn't leave when I should have. I wasn't supposed to feel anything, but I did. And it wasn't just guilt. There was this pull, this stupid, dangerous curiosity about what might have happened if I'd stayed longer, if we talked more, if I hadn't bolted at dawn. It was like my brain was stuck on a loop, replaying every second, every glance, every word, looking for something I couldn't even name. It got worse a week later. Ryan invited me over for a barbecue, just a small thing with some friends and family. I didn't want to go, God, I really didn't, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. "Come on, man, you've been ghosting me," he said, half laughing, half serious, his voice crackling through the phone. I could hear the hurt in it, the confusion, and it killed me. So I went, figuring I could keep my head down, make small talk, and avoid any weirdness. But Claire was there, of course, playing host, passing out drinks and laughing with everyone like nothing had happened. She looked the same as always, jeans, a loose blouse, that easy smile that made everyone feel at home. But every time our eyes met, I felt it again. That weight. That unspoken thing. She didn't say anything about that night, didn't act any different, but I could tell she was avoiding me too. She'd linger on the other side of the yard, chatting with Ryan's cousins or refilling the chip bowl, but I'd catch her glancing my way, and it'd send my heart racing, like I was back in that room, inches from her in the dark. At one point, I was grabbing a beer from the cooler, trying to blend into the background, when she came over to refill the ice. We were alone for the first time since that night, and the air felt thick, like we were both holding our breath. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low, like she didn't want anyone to overhear. I nodded, too quick, and mumbled something about being tired from work. She looked at me for a second longer than she should have, her eyes searching mine, and then she said, "It's okay, you know. It was just a mistake." But the way she said it, the way her voice caught, the way her eyes held mine, it didn't feel like she was just talking about the room mix-up. It felt like she was talking about something else, something we both knew we couldn't name. I wanted to say something, to ask what she meant, to figure out if she was as messed up about this as I was. But Ryan called her over before I could, his voice loud and cheerful, asking her to settle a bet about who'd win in a hot dog eating contest. She smiled, walked away, and left me standing there with a beer I didn't even want, my hands shaking like I'd just run a marathon. That barbecue was when I knew I was in trouble. Not because anything happened, but because I wanted it to. Not in some creepy, deliberate way, I wasn't plotting anything, wasn't trying to make a move. But there was this part of me, this stupid, reckless part, that kept wondering what it'd be like to talk to her again, to be alone with her, to see if that night meant something. And that scared the hell out of me, because Ryan was my brother, not by blood but by choice. He'd been there for me through every breakup, every bad day, every time I thought I'd screwed up my life. He'd trusted me his whole life, and here I was, letting my mind go places it had no right to go. I started pulling away even more after that, skipping hangouts, dodging his texts, letting his calls go to voicemail. He'd call me out on it, half joking, saying I was acting like I had a secret girlfriend or some big life drama he didn't know about. If only he knew how much worse it was. Every time I saw his name on my phone, I'd feel this pang, like I was betraying him just by existing. The worst part was, I couldn't stop thinking about Claire. Not just that night, but everything about her. The way she laughed, full and warm, like she meant it. The way she'd tease Ryan about his messy room or his obsession with fantasy football, but always with this affection that made you feel like she saw the best in everyone. The way she'd made me feel like I was more than just Ryan's friend, like I was someone worth listening to. I'd catch myself daydreaming about her, stupid stuff, like what it'd be like to grab coffee with her, just the two of us, or to hear her laugh at one of my dumb jokes again. Then I'd snap out of it, hating myself for even going there. I tried to distract myself, threw myself into work, hit the gym until I could barely move, even went on a couple of bad Tinder dates that left me feeling emptier than before. But nothing worked. She was in my head, and the guilt was crushing me. I kept telling myself nothing happened, that I hadn't done anything wrong, but it didn't feel that way. It felt like I'd betrayed Ryan just by thinking about her, by wanting something I had no right to want. A month later, Ryan invited me to a family dinner at his place. I almost said no, God, I wanted to, but he was insistent, saying his mom had specifically asked if I'd be there. That threw me off. Why would she ask about me? Was she just being polite, trying to keep things normal? Or was there something more, something she wasn't saying? The thought made my stomach churn, but I went anyway, mostly because I didn't want to seem suspicious. I was a wreck the whole day leading up to it, pacing my apartment, trying to figure out what I'd say if Claire brought it up. When I got there, she was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of sauce, her hair tied back, looking like she always did, calm, put together, like nothing could shake her. Ryan was setting the table, joking about how his mom's lasagna was the only reason he hadn't starved yet. It was so normal, so domestic, but I felt like an intruder, like I didn't belong in their house anymore. Dinner was fine on the surface, Claire's lasagna, some small talk about Ryan's new job, a couple of stories about his cousin's latest antics. But every time Claire spoke, I'd feel this jolt, like I was doing something wrong just by being there. Her voice was the same as always, warm and easy, but I couldn't shake the memory of that night, the way it had sounded in the dark, soft and heavy with something unspoken. I kept my eyes on my plate, nodding along to Ryan's stories, but I could feel her across the table, her presence like a weight I couldn't ignore. After dinner, Ryan got a call from work and stepped outside to take it, leaving me and Claire alone at the table. She started clearing plates, and I jumped up to help, mostly because I needed something to do with my hands, something to keep me from looking at her. We were at the sink, side by side, washing dishes in silence, when she said, "You've been avoiding me." It wasn't a question. I froze, the dish in my hand dripping water onto the floor, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "I haven't," I lied, but my voice was weak, barely a whisper. She turned, looked me right in the eye, and said, "It's okay. I get it. But we didn't do anything wrong." Her voice was steady, but there was this sadness in her eyes, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe it was just a mistake, a fluke, something we could both shove into a box and forget about. But standing there, so close I could smell that lavender scent again, I knew it wasn't that simple. The air between us felt charged, like one wrong word could set something off, something we'd both regret. I wanted to ask her if she felt it too, if that night had messed with her head the way it had mine, if she'd lain awake wondering what it meant. But before I could say anything, Ryan came back in, laughing about some work drama, oblivious to the tension in the room. Claire smiled, handed him a plate to dry, and just like that, the moment was gone. I left soon after, claiming I had an early morning, but really, I just needed to get out of there before I said something stupid, something that'd make this real. That dinner was the last straw. I knew I couldn't keep doing this, pretending everything was fine while carrying this secret, this guilt, this, whatever it was. I started pulling back even more, to the point where Ryan noticed and wouldn't let it go. We met up at a coffee shop one afternoon, and he cornered me, his usual grin gone. "What's your deal, man?" he asked, leaning across the table, his voice low but sharp. "You're acting like I did something to piss you off. What's going on?" I wanted to tell him. Not the whole truth, because how do you even start that conversation? But something, anything to explain why I was being such a shitty friend. I wanted to say, "I screwed up, man. I ended up in your mom's room by accident, and now I can't stop thinking about it." But I couldn't. How do you tell your best friend you shared a bed with his mom, even by mistake? How do you explain the thoughts you can't stop having, the ones that make you feel like a traitor every time you see him? So I lied, said I was just stressed about work, that I was going through some stuff I didn't want to drag him into. He looked at me for a long moment, like he was trying to decide whether to believe me, then nodded. "All right, man. But you know I'm here, right?" That was worse than anything, the fact that he was still trying to be a good friend, even when I was letting him down. Months passed, and I never went back to Ryan's place. He'd invite me for game nights, barbecues, even just to hang out and watch a movie, but I'd always have an excuse. Work was crazy, My car was in the shop, I was helping my parents with something, whatever sounded plausible. The truth was, I couldn't face Claire again. Not because I was afraid of her, but because I was afraid of myself. Afraid of what I'd feel if I saw her, afraid of what I might say or do if we were alone again. I kept telling myself distance would make it fade, that if I just stayed away long enough, I'd stop thinking about her, stop replaying that night in my head. But it didn't work. I'd see her in my mind every time I closed my eyes, her smile, her voice, that moment at the sink when she looked at me like she knew exactly what I was thinking. I'd catch myself wondering what she was doing, if she was okay, if she ever thought about that night. And then I'd hate myself for it, because every thought felt like another betrayal, another nail in the coffin of my friendship with Ryan. I started questioning everything. Had I made it all up? Had I turned a nothing moment into something it wasn't? Maybe Claire had just been kind, letting me stay because she felt bad for me, because she didn't want to make a big deal out of an honest mistake. Maybe I was the only one who felt anything, and I'd built this whole thing into some twisted fantasy in my head. But then I'd remember her eyes, the way she'd said, "We didn't do anything wrong," with that sad, heavy look, and I'd wonder if she was lying to herself too. I'd think about the barbecue, the dinner, all those moments where it felt like there was something between us, something neither of us could say out loud. Was it real, or was I just seeing what I wanted to see? The not knowing was the worst part, because it kept me stuck, unable to move forward, unable to let it go. I see Ryan less now, but we're still friends, at least on paper. He still texts me about grabbing a beer or catching a game, and I'll meet up sometimes, but it's not the same. Every time I see him, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to look at me and know. I see Claire sometimes too, in passing, at the grocery store, at a mutual friend's party, and we don't talk about it. We nod, smile, exchange small talk about the weather or Ryan's latest job. But there's this look in her eyes, this fleeting thing that makes me think she hasn't forgotten either. Maybe she's just as messed up about it as I am, carrying her own version of this guilt. Or maybe I'm still projecting, still chasing a feeling I don't even understand, still trying to make sense of a night that changed everything without changing anything at all. Here's the twist: nothing ever happened. Not really. We didn't kiss, didn't touch, didn't cross any line you could point to and say, "That's where it went wrong." But it feels like everything did. I'm still Ryan's friend, still part of his life, but there's this distance now, this thing I can't bridge. Every time I see his name pop up on my phone, I feel that guilt again, like I'm hiding something even though I can't name what it is. I keep wondering if I should have left that night, if I should have said something at the barbecue, at the dinner, anytime. I wonder if I'm a terrible friend for feeling this way, or if I'm just human, caught in a moment I didn't see coming. Most of all, I wonder if I'll ever stop feeling like I ruined something, even if I can't say what. I can't tell Ryan, not because anything happened, but because the truth would sound insane. "Hey, I accidentally slept in your mom's bed, and now I can't stop thinking about her." Yeah, that'd go over great. So I carry it, this secret that's not even a secret, this weight that's all in my head, and I don't know if I'll ever be free of it. So, tell me, have you ever made a mistake that could ruin your best friendship? Have you ever been stuck in a moment you knew was wrong but couldn't walk away from? What would you have done? Drop it in the comments, because I'm still trying to figure this out, and I could use some perspective. And if you think one night can change everything, hit that like button. Thanks for listening to my mess. It's been eating me alive, and getting it out feels like the only thing keeping me sane.